17 years have passed since the bloody shootout in Parañaque. But for the families left behind, it still feels like it all happened just yesterday. December 5th, 2008. Parañaque City sleeps under dim orange lights, a peaceful night broken only by the occasional hum of passing vehicles. But in the shadows, an operation is underway, its goal to capture dangerous criminals. The PNP Special Action Force is mobilized, ready for action. It was supposed to be a mission to stop ruthless robbers from the Waray-Waray Gang, known for their violent robberies, bloody killings, and brutal escapes. But as the night unfolds, 2 innocent lives will be lost, and the consequences will echo through the lives of many. This is a story of recklessness, grief, and the relentless search for justice, a story that still resonates in the hearts of those affected by this tragedy. The Waray-Waray Gang had been on the police's radar for months. They were notorious for their string of robberies, killings, and high-speed getaways that terrorized communities all over Metro Manila. The gang had been involved in violent crimes and were known for their ruthlessness, making them prime targets for law enforcement. The PNP Special Action Force had received intelligence that the gang would be operating in the area that night. The operation began at around 9 p.m. Armed and ready, the SEF officers moved in. The officers believed they were closing in on the criminals. A shootout ensued. Gunfire echoed through the streets. Officers were focused on their mission, but in the confusion of the crossfire, they failed to identify their targets accurately. The operation had turned into a deadly mistake. Meanwhile, Alfonso de Vera, a 53-year-old seafarer, was just minutes away from reuniting with his wife, Lillian. He had been working hard on a ship for months, and this was supposed to be a joyful moment. He was driving with his 7-year-old daughter, Lia, in their Isuzu Crosswind, a simple family car. It was a typical night for them, nothing out of the ordinary. They were heading to pick up Lillian, who had been waiting at a nearby store. Alfonso and Lia were looking forward to spending time with their loved ones. They had no idea that their lives were about to be torn apart. As they drove past the subdivision, the unthinkable happened. Gunshots rang out. The officers focused on the Waray-Waray suspects mistook the de Vera's car for one of the gang's getaway vehicles. Without warning, bullets slammed into the side of the crosswind. The sound of shattering glass was deafening. The car was hit more than 80 times. Alfonso was known, tried to protect his daughter. He got out of the vehicle, carrying her, wounded and terrified, looking for safety. But the shooting didn't stop. Minutes later, Alfonso and Lia were found beside a parked passenger jeepney. Alfonso was cradling her tightly, their bodies curled up in a fetal position, father and daughter, his last act to protect her from the gunfire. They were innocent. They had done nothing wrong. But the police didn't know that. The confusion of the shootout claimed their lives. The aftermath was a scene of utter devastation. The de Vera's Isuzu Crosswind was riddled with bullet holes, its windows shattered, the vehicle mangled by the police fire. The family's hopes of a peaceful reunion turned into a nightmare. Lillian de Vera's grief was immeasurable. She had lost everything in the blink of an eye. Her husband, her daughter, her sense of safety, and her trust in the justice system. But the pain of loss soon turned into something even more powerful, a relentless search for justice. Lillian filed double murder charges against 17 members of the PNP Special Action Force, accusing them of negligence, recklessness, and failure to properly identify their targets before opening fire. She argued that the officers had acted impulsively without regard for the lives of those around them. The system, she claimed, had failed her family, and she wasn't going to let them get away with it. The case moved into the courtroom, where Lillian's pursuit of justice became a battle not only for her family, but for the lives of those who had been forgotten by the system. The prosecution presented witnesses, evidence, and expert testimony. But the defense argued that the police officers had acted in self-defense, in the heat of the moment, in a life-or-death situation. The difficulty in pinpointing exactly who had fired the fatal shots was a key issue. The shooters had been wearing masks, making it impossible to identify who was responsible. Despite the heartbreaking evidence, no one could conclusively prove which officer had pulled the trigger that killed Alfonso and Lia. In 2014, after years of legal battles, the Court of Appeals dismissed the case. The reason? Lack of direct evidence. There was no clear identification of the shooter. No conspiracy was proven. The justice system, once again, failed to hold anyone accountable for the deaths of two innocent people. The decision sparked outrage across the country. How could justice be denied so easily? How could a child be killed with no justice served? The public's frustration boiled over, but the legal system had spoken, and for the de Vera family, the dream of justice seemed farther out of reach than ever before. The dismissal of the case exposed the cracks in the justice system. It raised questions about accountability, the power of the police, and the value placed on civilian lives. Was it acceptable for innocent people to die at the hands of law enforcement, especially when there were no consequences for their actions? Could the public continue to trust a system that allowed such tragedies to go unpunished? Lillian's fight for justice became a symbol of the struggle against systemic corruption and police violence in the Philippines. It wasn't just about one family. It was about all the lives that had been destroyed by the reckless actions of those sworn to protect them. Lillian never gave up. She continued to push for change, to seek justice, even when the system seemed to close its doors on her. Her case became a rallying cry for victims of police brutality, for families whose loved ones were killed by those who should have been their protectors. She became a voice for the voiceless, a mother who lost everything but refused to stop fighting. Despite the pain and heartbreak, she pressed on, because the truth was she couldn't let go. Not when so much was at stake, not when her daughter and husband's deaths had been swept aside without accountability. The Parañaque shootout eventually faded from the headlines. Time passed, and news stories took over the news cycle. But for those who had been affected, the pain never truly left. The faces of Alfonso and Lia de Vera would remain in the memories of those who knew their story. Because behind every bullet, behind every act of violence, there is a name, there is a family, there is a child whose future was stolen. And the fight for justice continues, because it's not just about one tragic event. It's about all the lives that have been lost, all the voices that have been silenced. This was the story of Alfonso and Lia de Vera, victims of a war they had no part in, justice delayed, justice denied.